Imagine lying down in a hut so cold that frost formed on the inside of the walls. Wind slipped through every gap in the wooden planks, biting your skin as if the night itself wanted you gone. Yet every morning, peasants in the Middle Ages woke up alive. They didn't just endure the cold, they engineered clever systems to outwit it. Today, we're uncovering 10 survival tricks medieval peasants used to sleep through brutal winters in their drafty huts without freezing to death. These aren't myths, they're ingenious techniques that turn our modern whining about cold apartments into something laughable. So grab your blanket, because what you're about to hear will make you rethink everything you thought you knew about medieval life. The first secret lay right beneath their feet. Medieval peasants discovered that if you dig your fire into the ground, the warmth doesn't just shoot up in a column, it spreads sideways first. This was called the sunken hearth, and it turned a single flame into a whole house heating system. Stones surrounded the pit, not for decoration, but because stones acted like batteries. They absorbed heat all evening, then radiated it back long after the fire burned down. River rocks were prized because they held heat longer without cracking. The hearth's placement mattered too. If you set your fire against a wall, half the room froze. Put it dead center, though, and heat radiated evenly in all directions. Everyone in the family got a share, and dangerous cold spots disappeared. Even the physics makes sense. Radiant heat flows like water, touching everything before finally rising. For peasants, this meant waking up warm, not waking up frozen. We talk about lithium batteries powering modern life. But peasants had their own version. Heat-storing rocks. After a fire burned low, glowing stones were carefully pulled from the pit, wrapped in hides or cloth, and slipped beneath bedding. These weren't just hot water bottles, they were medieval electric blankets. The science? Stones have what's called high thermal capacity. They absorb energy slowly and release it just as slowly. A hot stone tucked under a straw mattress could radiate gentle warmth for hours, sometimes until morning. Families passed these stones around like prized possessions. Children hugged them to their chests. Elders pressed them against aching joints. Today, survivalists still use the same trick when camping in the cold. Except medieval peasants weren't experimenting. They were experts. They knew which stones worked and which shattered dangerously. It wasn't luck. It was a precise science born from centuries of bitter winters. Now imagine this. Beneath your feet isn't bare dirt, but a carefully engineered thermal system. Medieval peasants often spread ash or ash mixed with clay across their floors. Why? Ash is full of microscopic air pockets, and air is the best insulator nature gives us. Think of it as a medieval carpet pad. The layer of ash slowed heat loss into the frozen ground. Add rushes, straw, or reeds on top, and suddenly you had flooring that trapped heat like a primitive insulation board. Clay mixed with ash created an even more effective barrier, almost like underfloor heating, without pipes or wires. This simple trick made the difference between warm toes and frostbite. Ash wasn't waste. It was technology. Every scoop from the hearth served double duty, both as insulation and as a survival material. Where you put the fire could decide whether you lived through the night. A fire against a wall wasted heat and risked burning the thatch above. But a central fire pit, dug low, allowed heat to spread evenly and reduced sparks. Drafts couldn't easily steal heat, and embers stayed contained. This wasn't just warmth. It was survival architecture. A family could gather around the center, forming a ring of bodies, animals, and bedding. The flames became the heart of the home, its pulse beating warmth into every corner. When we think of peasants, we picture crude huts. In reality, their heating systems were carefully engineered with a mix of practicality, physics, and long-honed experience. Hot air rises. Medieval peasants didn't just know it, they used it. Many huts included raised sleeping platforms or lofts built into the rafters. At floor level, cold air pooled like water in a bowl. But a few feet higher, the air was measurably warmer. Families built wooden platforms across beams, climbed up, and slept in the warmest air pocket of the hut. Children, whose smaller bodies lost heat faster, got the prime spots up high. Parents stayed lower to tend the fire through the night. Smart builders even left gaps between floorboards so heat from below could filter up while the structure stayed strong. It was an elegant solution, vertical architecture turning wasted space into life-saving warmth. Modern bunk beds? They're more medieval than you think. Forget memory foam. Medieval peasants slept on straw mattresses, but don't picture thin, scratchy piles. These were thick bundles, sometimes a foot deep, sewn into cloth casings and refreshed each season. Every stalk of straw was hollow, like a tiny thermos. Thousands of them together trapped heat against the body. On top went wool blankets, sheepskins, or thick furs, which stopped warmth from sinking downward. Some families even built double mattresses, one layer of straw, an air gap, and another straw layer. That insulation sandwich kept heat trapped longer. Children were often cocooned in layers of fur, like burritos. Parents called it love. Science calls it heat retention. These mattresses were so effective that even if the fire died at midnight, families could wake up warm at dawn. It was the bed, not the fire, that often saved them. Here's a trick we forget today. Most heat loss comes from the head. That's why nightcaps were as essential as blankets. Woven from wool, they trapped warmth at the scalp and covered ears. But peasants went further. They wrapped hands in mittens or cloth strips because uncovered hands acted like radiators. Some wrapped cloth around their necks, sealing off the body's chimney. Breathing was another heat thief. Every exhale sent warmth out into the cold. Peasants solved it with cloth breath warmers, wrappings over nose and mouth that recycled body heat and pre-warmed inhaled air. Together, these hacks formed a full-body insulation system. It wasn't fashion, it was armor against the cold. A medieval peasant bundled for bed might look ridiculous to us, but they slept warm while others froze. When fires burned low, peasants had a backup furnace. Their animals, chickens, goats, and sometimes even pigs were brought indoors during the coldest nights. Their body heat raised the temperature in huts by several degrees. One pig radiated as much warmth as a small stove. Chickens clustered together became feathered space heaters. Families positioned animals strategically, large beasts near the center, smaller ones along the sides. Everyone benefited from the warmth. It wasn't glamorous, the smell was rough, but survival trumps comfort, and the arrangement had bonuses: milk, eggs, and morning bacon right in the room. It was, in effect, biological central heating centuries before furnaces existed. Keeping a fire burning all night without fuel runs out? Medieval peasants mastered it through fire banking. At bedtime, glowing coals were buried under thick layers of ash. The ash smothered oxygen but trapped heat. By morning, embers were still alive, ready to burst back into flame with fresh wood. This was more than convenience. It was survival. Restarting a fire from scratch in freezing weather was risky. One mistake, and the hut went cold. Banked fires guaranteed warmth every morning. Some families added clay pots filled with embers under their bedding, resting them on stone slabs to avoid burns. These were medieval hot water bottles, except they glowed red. In peat-rich areas, blocks of peat provided slow, steady heat that lasted entire nights. Banking was an art. Too much ash and the fire died. Too little and it flared dangerously. Generations passed down the exact technique because mistakes weren't just inconvenient, they were deadly. Modern people think sleeping 8 hours straight is normal. Medieval peasants didn't. They followed a rhythm called first sleep and second sleep. Here's how it worked. Families went to bed soon after sunset, slept for 4 hours, then naturally woke around midnight. For 1 to 2 hours, they stoked fires, checked animals, or prayed. Then they slipped back into second sleep until dawn. This wasn't insomnia. It was survival. That midnight waking perfectly matched the fire's cooling cycle. Someone was always awake to add wood, adjust bedding, or tend to children. The coldest hours of night, the pre-dawn freeze, were met with freshly stoked flames. The system was brilliant. Biology itself became a survival tool. Instead of fighting the cold with brute force, peasants adapted their schedules to work with it. Sleep wasn't broken, it was optimized for survival. These weren't desperate hacks, they were refined survival systems, perfected across centuries of brutal winters. And here's the lesson. Survival isn't about luxury, it's about knowledge. Modern heating may fail, batteries may die, but the wisdom of peasants endures. So here's my question for you. Could you survive a medieval winter night in a hut using just these tricks, or would you tap out before morning? Drop your answer in the comments. I'd love to hear what you think. And if this story of peasant ingenuity surprised you, make sure to hit like, share it with a friend who always complains about the cold, and subscribe for more forgotten survival wisdom from the past, because history isn't just old. It's full of answers we may need again.